The story of Somalia begins deep in the mists of time, long before written records. This land, strategically located on the Horn of Africa, has been a cradle of human activity for millennia. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of early humans living here, leaving behind tools and artifacts that speak of a vibrant prehistoric culture. These early inhabitants were skilled hunters and gatherers, adapting to the diverse landscapes of the region, from the arid northern plains to the more fertile river valleys in the south. Their legacy is etched into the very soil of Somalia, a silent testament to the deep and enduring roots of its people, who have called this corner of the world home since the dawn of humanity. One of the most breathtaking windows into this ancient past is the al-Ghazi rock art site, located in the northwestern region of Somaliland. Discovered only in 2002, these caves contain some of the oldest and best-preserved rock paintings in all of Africa. The vibrant images, estimated to be between 5,000 and 10,000 years old, depict colorfully adorned cattle, humans in ceremonial dress, and even a giraffe. These paintings are not just simple drawings. They are a complex expression of a sophisticated Neolithic culture. They show us that the ancient people of this region had a deep spiritual connection to their livestock and a well-developed artistic tradition, a heritage that has been passed down through countless generations. The significance of sites like al-Ghazi cannot be overstated. They provide concrete proof of a developed civilization flourishing in the Horn of Africa, long before the great empires of Egypt and Rome. The people who created this art were not isolated. They were part of a network of communities that thrived across the region. They understood their environment intimately, managed herds of cattle, and possessed a rich cultural and spiritual life. This ancient foundation is crucial to understanding the Somali identity today, an identity built on resilience, a deep connection to the land, and a history that stretches back to the very beginnings of human civilization on the African continent. As we look at these ancient footprints, we see the first chapter of a long and complex story. The early Somalis were not just surviving, they were building societies and creating art that still inspires awe today. They laid the groundwork for the powerful trading kingdoms and sultanates that would later rise along the Somali coast. This deep history is a source of immense pride and a reminder that the Somali narrative is one of ancient origins and continuous cultural development. The story of Somalia is not one that begins with conflict or colonialism, but with the creative and spiritual expressions of a people deeply rooted in their ancestral homeland. Ancient texts from Egypt speak of a mysterious and wealthy land called Punt, the land of the gods. For centuries, historians debated its location, but many now believe that Punt was centered in modern-day Somalia. Around 2500 BCE, Egyptian pharaohs began sending great expeditions to this distant shore. They sought precious goods that were abundant in the region: fragrant frankincense and myrrh, valuable resins used in religious rituals and mummification. They also traded for gold, ebony, and exotic animals like giraffes and baboons. These voyages were major undertakings, demonstrating the great importance of Punt to the Egyptian empire and its culture. The relationship between Egypt and Punt was one of mutual respect and trade, not conquest. The famous reliefs at the Temple of Queen Hatshepsut depict a successful expedition to Punt around 1470 BCE. The images show Egyptian ships arriving and being greeted by the people of Punt, who lived in distinctive conical houses raised on stilts. The Egyptians returned with their ships heavily laden with treasures, including live incense trees to be planted in Egypt. This exchange highlights the sophistication of the people of Punt. They were not passive subjects but active partners in a lucrative international trade network that connected Africa with the great powers of the ancient world. Beyond its connections with Egypt, the Somali coast became a vital link in the wider Indian Ocean trade network, an early version of the maritime Silk Road. Its strategic location was a natural bridge between the Mediterranean world, the Arabian Peninsula, India, and even distant China. Somali sailors and merchants were masters of the monsoon winds, using their knowledge to navigate vast distances across the open sea. They exported their own valuable goods and also acted as middlemen, facilitating the flow of products between East and West. This long history of maritime commerce shaped the character of the Somali people, fostering a cosmopolitan and entrepreneurial spirit. This era of classical trade laid the foundation for the urban centers that would later flourish along the coast. The constant interaction with different cultures brought new ideas, technologies, and beliefs to the region. The people of ancient Somalia were not isolated, but were deeply connected to the major currents of world history. They were skilled traders, expert navigators, and producers of highly sought-after commodities. This legacy of global engagement and commercial skill would continue to define Somali society for centuries to come, creating a culture that was both uniquely African and profoundly international in its outlook. Building on the foundations of ancient trade, a series of powerful and prosperous city-states emerged along the Somali coastline during the medieval period. Cities like Zayla, Berbera, Mogadishu, and Merka became bustling centers of commerce and culture. These port cities were not part of a single empire, but were independent entities, often ruled by local dynasties of merchants. They controlled the lucrative trade routes that passed through their harbors, connecting the African interior with Arabia, Persia, and India. Their wealth was legendary, attracting travelers and traders from across the known world who came to marvel at their vibrant markets and impressive architecture. Mogadishu, in particular, became known as the City of Islam and one of the most important commercial hubs in the Indian Ocean. The 14th century Moroccan scholar Ibn Battuta visited the city and was deeply impressed by its wealth and the generosity of its people. He described a thriving metropolis with a sophisticated government, a well-established legal system based on Islamic law, and a prosperous merchant class that traded in gold, ivory, and textiles. The city minted its own currency, a clear sign of its economic independence and power. The ruins of its grand mosques, palaces, and houses still stand today as a reminder of this glorious golden age. This era also saw the rise of powerful inland sultanates that consolidated control over larger territories. The Ajuran Sultanate, which dominated southern and central Somalia from the 13th to the 17th centuries, is a prime example. The Ajuran rulers were masters of hydraulic engineering, building an extensive network of wells, cisterns, and canals to support agriculture in the fertile lands between the Shabelle and Juba rivers. This allowed them to control the region's agricultural resources, levy taxes on farmers, and maintain a powerful, centralized state. Their military strength ensured that they could protect the coastal cities and control the trade routes leading into the interior. Another significant power was the Adal Sultanate in the north, centered around the city of Zila. Adal became a major force in the region, often clashing with the neighboring Christian Ethiopian Empire. In the 16th century, under the leadership of the brilliant military commander Ahmad ibn Ibrahim al-Ghazi, known as Ahmed Gurey, or the Left-Handed, Adal launched a major campaign that brought much of the Ethiopian highlands under its control. Although his conquests were eventually reversed, Ahmed Gurey remains a heroic figure in Somali history, a symbol of resistance and the power of a united Somali force in the Horn of Africa. Islam did not arrive in Somalia through conquest, but through the peaceful interactions of trade and migration. Arab and Persian merchants, who had been sailing to the Somali coast for centuries, brought their faith with them. The first mosques were established in coastal cities like Zayla and Mogadishu, as early as the 7th and 8th centuries, making Somalia one of the first places in Africa to embrace the new religion. Early Somali converts were drawn to Islam's message of unity and equality, and the faith quickly took root among the urban merchant classes. From these coastal centers, it gradually spread inland along the trade routes. The adoption of Islam had a profound and lasting impact on every aspect of Somali culture and society. It provided a unifying framework of belief that transcended clan loyalties, connecting Somalis to the wider global community of Muslims, the Ummah. Islamic law, or Sharia, became the basis for the legal system, guiding matters of justice, commerce, and personal conduct. The Arabic script was adopted for writing, which facilitated scholarship and administration. Great centers of Islamic learning emerged in cities like Mogadishu and Harar, attracting scholars from across the Muslim world and producing their own important works of theology and law. Alongside formal Islamic learning, a unique Somali brand of Sufism also flourished. Sufism is a mystical dimension of Islam that emphasizes a direct, personal connection with God through practices like chanting, or dhikr, and veneration of saints. Religious orders, or tariqas, such as the Qadiriyya and Salihiyya, gained large followings across the country. These orders played a crucial social role, serving as centers for education, community organizing, and spiritual guidance. Their leaders, known as sheikhs, were often respected figures who could mediate disputes and mobilize people, blending Islamic teachings with traditional Somali customs and values. The Somali clan system, a fundamental part of the social structure, was also integrated with Islamic traditions. While clans are based on lineage and kinship, Islamic principles help to regulate interactions between them. Oral tradition, another cornerstone of Somali culture, was enriched by Islamic themes. Poets, who hold a position of great respect in society, began to incorporate Islamic stories, proverbs, and moral teachings into their work. This fusion created a unique cultural synthesis, where a deep-seated Somali identity, based on language, lineage, and pastoral traditions, was beautifully interwoven with the universal principles and rich intellectual heritage of Islam. In the late 19th century, the Horn of Africa became a target for European colonial ambitions. This period, known as the Scramble for Africa, saw the Somali inhabited territories carved up by three different European powers. Great Britain established a protectorate in the north, called British Somaliland, primarily to secure supplies for its strategic port of Aden. Italy colonized the much larger southern and central regions, which became Italian Somaliland, seeing it as a prestigious addition to its new empire. France took control of a small but important area around the Gulf of Tajura, creating French Somaliland, which is now the independent nation of Djibouti. The imposition of colonial rule was, honestly, a traumatic experience that disregarded traditional boundaries and divided the Somali people under different administrations. The Europeans drew arbitrary lines on maps, splitting clans and communities. Their primary interest was not the welfare of the Somali people, but the strategic and economic benefits for their own empires. They imposed new laws, taxes, and administrative systems that disrupted traditional ways of life. While the Italians invested in some infrastructure, like plantations and roads, these developments were designed to serve the colonial economy, not to empower the local population. This division created deep political and economic inequalities that would have lasting consequences. The Somali people did not passively accept foreign domination. The most famous and sustained resistance was led by Sayyid Muhammad Abdullah Hassan, a charismatic religious leader and brilliant poet. Known to the British as the Mad Mullah, he was a revered figure among his followers. Starting in 1899, he rallied a diverse coalition of Somali clans under the banner of his dervish movement. He declared a holy war, or jihad, against the colonial occupiers, whom he saw as Christian infidels who were destroying Somali culture and religion. For over 2 decades, his dervish fighters engaged in a fierce guerrilla war against the British, Italian, and Ethiopian forces. The dervish resistance was a remarkable feat of military and political organization. The Sayyid used his powerful poetry to inspire his followers, critique his enemies, and spread his message of unity and anti-colonial defiance. He established a state with a modern administrative structure and a disciplined army, successfully repelling numerous colonial expeditions. It was only in 1920, with the use of new military technology, airplanes, that the British were finally able to bomb the dervish forts and defeat the movement. Although his struggle ultimately ended in defeat, Sayyid Muhammad Abdullah Hassan is remembered as a national hero, a father of the Somali nation whose legacy inspired future generations to fight for independence. After World War II, the tide of colonialism began to recede, and a powerful wave of nationalism swept across Somalia. Political parties like the Somali Youth League, or SYL, emerged, advocating for a unified and independent Somali state. Their vision was to bring together the territories that had been divided by the colonial powers. On July 1, 1960, this dream became a partial reality. The former British Somaliland in the north and the UN Trust territory of Italian Somaliland in the south united to form the independent Somali Republic. It was, honestly, a moment of immense joy and optimism. The new nation adopted a flag with a 5-pointed star, representing the 5 regions where Somalis lived, a symbol of the unfulfilled dream of Greater Somalia. The first years of independence were a period of vibrant democratic experimentation. The new republic established a parliamentary system of government with a president, a prime minister, and a national assembly. Multiple political parties competed in regular elections, and there was a relatively free press and an active civil society. The early leaders, such as President Aden Abdullah Osman Dar, were committed to building a modern, democratic nation-state. They focused on creating national institutions, including a unified legal system, a national army, and a public education system. The challenge was immense. They had to merge 2 territories with different colonial legacies, languages, and administrative structures. Despite the initial hope, the young republic faced significant challenges. The dream of uniting all Somali inhabited territories, including those in neighboring Ethiopia, Kenya, and French Somaliland, led to border conflicts and strained international relations. Internally, clan politics, which had been suppressed under colonialism, re-emerged as a powerful force in the competition for political power and resources. Corruption and nepotism became widespread, eroding public trust in the democratic system. By the late 1960s, many Somalis had grown disillusioned with the government, feeling that the promise of independence had not been fulfilled for ordinary people. This growing discontent set the stage for a dramatic political shift. The assassination of President Abdurrashid Ali Sharmarke in October 1969 created a power vacuum. Just days later, the military, led by Major General Mohammed Siad Barre, seized power in a bloodless coup. The military leaders suspended the constitution, arrested the civilian government officials, and dissolved the National Assembly and political parties. They promised to end corruption, tribalism, and nepotism, and to restore national pride. The democratic experiment in Somalia had come to an abrupt end, ushering in a new and uncertain era for the nation. Following the 1969 coup, Siad Barre established the Supreme Revolutionary Council to rule the country. He declared an end to the old ways and introduced a new political ideology called scientific socialism. This was basically a unique blend of Marxist-Leninist principles and Islamic teachings, adapted to the Somali context. The official name of the country was changed to the Somali Democratic Republic. Barre's government launched ambitious campaigns to promote literacy, improve public health, and resettle nomadic populations affected by drought. One of his most significant achievements was the adoption of a standardized Latin script for the Somali language in 1972, which allowed for a nationwide literacy campaign and helped to unify the country administratively. In the early years, Barre's regime enjoyed considerable popular support. He publicly denounced tribalism, which he renamed clanism, and made it illegal to promote clan interests. His government's social programs were seen as a positive step towards modernizing the country and creating a more equitable society. The state took control of the economy, nationalizing banks, industries, and foreign-owned companies. Barre aligned Somalia with the Soviet Union, receiving significant military and economic aid that helped him build one of the strongest armies in Africa. This period was marked by a sense of national purpose and pride, as the government seemed to be making real progress. However, the revolutionary zeal soon gave way to an increasingly authoritarian and repressive rule. Siad Barre concentrated all power in his own hands, creating a cult of personality around himself as the father of the nation. He established a powerful and feared intelligence agency, the National Security Service, or NSS, which was used to spy on citizens, suppress dissent, and eliminate political opponents. The initial promise to end clanism proved to be hollow. Barre increasingly relied on his own clan and related clan families to maintain his grip on power, alienating other major clans and sowing the seeds of future conflict. The turning point for Barre's regime was the Ogaden War of 1977-78. In an attempt to realize the dream of a greater Somalia, Barre launched an invasion of the Somali-inhabited Ogaden region of Ethiopia. The Somali army initially had great success. However, the Soviet Union, which had also been allied with Ethiopia's new communist government, switched its support to Ethiopia and airlifted thousands of Cuban troops to help push the Somalis back. The devastating defeat shattered the morale of the Somali army and weakened Barre's regime. The economic and human cost of the war was enormous, and it marked the beginning of the end of his rule, fueling opposition movements that would eventually tear the country apart. The defeat in the Ogaden War was a deep wound to the Somali national psyche and fatally weakened Siad Barre's government. The regime became more brutal and paranoid, cracking down harshly on any perceived opposition. Various clan-based armed rebel groups began to form, challenging the central government's authority. The Somali National Movement in the north, the United Somali Congress in the central regions, and the Somali Patriotic Movement in the south launched guerrilla campaigns against Barre's forces. The government responded with extreme violence, particularly in the north, where cities like Hargeisa were subjected to aerial bombardment, leading to tens of thousands of deaths and creating a massive refugee crisis. In January 1991, the rebel forces of the United Somali Congress finally fought their way into the capital, Mogadishu. forcing Siad Barre to flee. However, this was not a moment of liberation, but the beginning of a catastrophic new chapter. The rebel groups, which had been united only by their opposition to Barre, immediately turned on each other in a vicious struggle for power. The United Somali Congress itself split into factions led by rival warlords, Ali Mahdi Mohammed and Mohammed Farah Aidid. Mogadishu descended into a brutal free-for-all, with different militias carving the city into personal fiefdoms. The national government completely disintegrated, and all state institutions, the police, the judiciary, schools, and hospitals, collapsed. The fighting, combined with a severe drought, created one of the worst humanitarian disasters of the late 20th century. A devastating famine swept across the southern part of the country, killing an estimated 300,000 people. Heartbreaking images of starving children were broadcast around the world, prompting a major international response. In 1992, the United Nations launched a humanitarian mission, UNITAF, led by the United States, with the goal of securing aid routes and ensuring that food could reach the starving population. While the mission, known as Operation Restore Hope, was initially successful in ending the famine, it soon became entangled in the complex clan politics. The UN's mission expanded to include nation-building and disarmament, a task for which it was, honestly, ill-prepared. This led to direct conflict with Somali militias, culminating in the infamous Black Hawk Down incident in October 1993. In a bloody street battle in Mogadishu, 2 U.S. Black Hawk helicopters were shot down, and 18 American soldiers and hundreds of Somalis were killed. The incident shocked the American public and led to the withdrawal of international forces. Somalia was left to its fate, abandoned by a world that no longer had the appetite to intervene. The country remained a failed state, ruled by warlords, with no functioning central government for over a decade. In the vacuum left by the collapse of the state, a new and dangerous force emerged: Islamist extremist groups. The most powerful of these was al-Shabaab, which means the youth in Arabic. This group grew out of the remnants of an earlier movement called the Islamic Courts Union, which had briefly brought order to Mogadishu in 2006, before being ousted by an Ethiopian invasion. Al-Shabaab sought to impose its own strict and violent interpretation of Islamic law on the country. Through brutal tactics, including suicide bombings and assassinations, it managed to take control of Mogadishu and large parts of southern and central Somalia, posing a major threat to regional and international security. The rise of al-Shabaab prompted a renewed international response. The African Union launched a peacekeeping mission, AMISOM, composed of troops from neighboring countries like Uganda and Burundi, to protect the fragile transitional government. With crucial support from AMISOM, as well as military assistance from the United States and other partners, Somali government forces began a long and difficult campaign to push al-Shabaab out of major cities. In 2011, the militants were driven out of Mogadishu, and they have since lost control of most other urban centers. However, the group has not been defeated. It has retreated to rural areas and continues to wage a deadly insurgency. A major turning point came in 2012 with the establishment of the federal government of Somalia. This was the first permanent, internationally recognized central government in the country in over 2 decades. A new constitution was adopted, and a new federal parliament was selected, which in turn elected a new president in a process that was widely seen as a step forward. Since then, Somalia has held several peaceful transfers of presidential power, a remarkable achievement for a country emerging from decades of conflict. The government, with international support, has been working to rebuild state institutions, reform the security sector, and deliver basic services to its people. Today, on April 11, 2026, the story of Somalia is one of cautious optimism and incredible resilience. The capital, Mogadishu, is experiencing a rebirth, with new construction, bustling markets, and a vibrant cultural life returning to its streets. The Somali diaspora has been returning, bringing investment, skills, and hope. Yet, immense challenges remain. Security is fragile, al-Shabaab continues to be a threat, and political tensions between the federal government and member states persist. Climate change is fueling more frequent and severe droughts, threatening the livelihoods of millions. But the Somali people, who have endured so much, continue to demonstrate an unbreakable spirit. Their long history, from the land of Punt to the present day, is a testament to their capacity to overcome adversity and build a brighter future for their nation. an important anchor of culture and history in